Okay, we're about to start the assembly of the robot from the various parts that we've built. I did want to point out that I'm skipping something. There is a step called an integrated jack, and I have built one of these, but I actually didn't add it to my first robot that I built, and I'm not going to suggest that you do this. This allows you, it sits underneath the robot when it's finished, and it allows you to lift the wheels off the ground, but you have to have either string or rubber bands to make it work well, and it just didn't seem like it necessarily was worth it. But there are instructions, and you can build this if you want. All right, so we're ready to assemble the chassis and load the robot on it. So we're going to start with the two pieces we built first. If you remember, this is the horizontal chassis element, or the vertical chassis element, and this is the horizontal chassis element. And what we want to do is to slide these two together and connect them. Now, when I did this, I spent quite a bit of time messing with it, trying to figure out how to get these two to go together. Because ultimately, there are several pegs. These red pegs at this end are going to connect into the white ends of the horizontal part. And there's, at this end, blue pegs that are going to connect. And there are also these black pegs that are going to connect. Well, you can back out the red and blue pegs. You can pull them back so that they clear out of the way. And then theoretically, you could slide this into place and push them back in place. The problem is these black pegs, which we need for stability, they don't work that way. And I tried everything to try to get this to work, and ultimately realized that it doesn't work. You are going to have to take this part apart in order to install this section. The easiest thing to do is to take the outer units off, the sides off completely, put this unit in place, and then put the sides back. So that's what we're going to do here today. So when I say the sides, I mean these gray units and this white L-beam that we're just going to gently detach from the frame parts. We're kind of undoing some work we did earlier, but that turns out to just be a necessary process. Okay. Now, what we're going to do is to take these two long white beams and slide them through the two frames that we have. I don't know if you can see this exactly, but notice these two blue parts, those are going to hook into the bottom of this frame. So that's the first thing that we can do. We're just going to hook those together. Nope. Go in where you want to go. These are rotating a little bit, so it's taking a little bit of effort to get them to go in. There we go. All right, so now these are hooked in, and now I can actually push these blue pegs that I backed out back through. Now these are really strongly connected together. The next step is then to connect that with the other framing piece, and where we want them to connect is the question. So we're going to slide these down. We want them to hook in together. We want the ends of the white pieces to snug up against these T pieces so that the red pegs go right in the very end, the last circles. So it looks like this. Okay, now having done this, we need to put our other parts back on. The way they fit is that these two blue and black pegs are going to go right here. The black peg is going to connect to the new part that we've added. The red peg goes in up above. It's a little bit of a trick to get all of these pegs back exactly where they were. but you should be able to do it. And the parts like to rotate a little bit as you do this too. It's the red peg, the black peg, go in. There we go. Oh yeah. And the top of this guy, remember, goes into the blue peg, which I didn't do on the other side. This is gonna look like chaos when you watch the video, I can tell. Okay, I've put the sides back on. I'm not quite sure why we didn't just do this in the first place, but I'm just going with their instructions, so we'll follow along and make it work. Okay, we're gonna add a cross beam at this end to give us some strength, and then we're gonna add the drive wheels at this other end, and that'll be our next steps. So we're gonna need 2 of these. They're 3 long. They have the axle in the 90 degrees off from the holes. So what you wanna do is set this flat. We're gonna use these little half axle, half peg blue guys, which we should be starting to run out of. So put that in from the bottom. And then we're going to put a black peg on one side at the end. Then we're going to do the same thing the other way. So we put a blue axle in from the bottom and a black peg. So these point in toward each other. And then what we're going to do is to mount these at this end of the robot. And here's where I think the way they suggested that you mount this is wrong. So this is going to go on this side. This is going to go on this side. They have it in the pictures mounted in the second slot back. I cannot make that work. So I would suggest you put it in the very last slot and use the black pegs to attach these support structures. And then we're going to have a beam which should be 11 long. And that's what's going to connect to the ends of the blue pegs down here. All right, so all this is doing is giving a little more support in this direction at this end. It rotates a little so we can rotate it in and out of our way as we add things to the robot. Okay, now we're ready to add the drive wheels. The drive wheel construct that we built before has the places that we need to connect. So the first thing to realize is that this is the back end of the robot, and we want the motor connector to be at that back end. So the wheel is actually going to go forward of the motor connector. So this is the direction we'd be attaching the wheel. We're going to do the same thing on the other side. Well, the places that we're going to attach to the chassis are these 2 axles and these 2 blue pegs, and we have those on both sides. So what we do is to attach these 2 axles to these 2 slots, and the 2 blue pegs will go into these slots that are further forward. So I'm just going to start that. We have to slide the axles in first, and then we get to the blue pegs, and I'm going to click those into place, and the axles will stick out the end a little bit, and that's just fine. All right, that's one wheel. And we do the same thing on the other side. Remember, this part goes at the back, the wheel goes further forward. We're going to connect the axles and the blue pegs to this location and the locations at the front of the beam we added. So we'll swiggle that on there and click it in place. There we go. This is starting to look like a robot chassis. All right, now we're gonna add the tail ball so this will balance. That's gonna sit right under the weight of the engines, the motors themselves. So the first thing we're gonna do is to add a support piece. This is going to support the motors and hold them together. There's only one piece like this. It looks like a ladder that's missing a rung. And then we're taking the red connector pins and more of these little blue pegs that have an axle on one end. We're going to stick those together. And then we're going to put them in these holes. You can see I've done 3 already. Then we're not putting the pegs in all the way because there won't be room for that. They need to go in just part way. Okay, what I'm going to show you next, I'm going to hold the robot upside down so you can see. We have these beams on the bottom, and this piece will actually fit. You have to run these pegs through from the outside, like this, and it'll lock this piece to it. Okay, see how I did that? I'll do the same thing on the other side. Just like that. And it supports these motors and fixes them really firmly together. All right, now we're adding the tail ball. Remember, this is the tail ball unit. The trick here is we have 2 pegs up atop and 3 lower down. And we're going to put the upper peg into this beam that's on the actual motor, and the other pegs will go on the unit that's below that. So they all need to line up exactly, 6 pegs all at once. And you just wiggle them into place. And that's now the tail ball in position.